Hi, Doowovid.
Strictly speaking, we consider part of the Israeli state, but the rest of the West Bank.
Hi, Doowovid.
Hey, I was gonna be getting another strike.
Yeah, I was just being stupid about the football. I was watching it and for some strange reason I felt I had to share it, and it resulted in a copyright strike, and that's me. But I've still got this channel, and yeah, and Karani started today. Is that you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So where are you streaming?
I'm streaming on my secondary channel, and yeah, I thought since the Yay story blew up, it would be a good time to talk to you. Did you hear it? I mean, it was just so weird. Him wearing this weird. It's not even a balaclava, is it? He was just completely. His whole head was in this.
I didn't watch it yet.
Ah, and okay, so you don't know about it. Maybe you want to watch it first before commenting on it, or
Well, I mean, it's like 4 hours. I mean, I saw just the one clip.
yeah,
And it
I
hasn't
only
even
saw that.
finished, so I could upload it. I'm not even sure where to watch it, but I mean, it's still going.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, but I think it's a 4 hour show, so um, I'm not sure. It'll probably be over at 6 o'clock. I'll
But
watch.
it's so crazy. It's like, well, who cares what he says anyway? I mean, yeah, he can. He's a rapper. Why is everybody taking him so seriously? And but it's almost unholy the way people are getting so excited about it. I mean, who cares what Ye says about Jews? I mean, I suppose it's because yes, he's been
Were you sure
platformed.
that? I mean, is it anyone really other than Jews that care about it?
Okay, my take on it is that
I mean,
it's.
that would be my impression that really only Jews really care about it.
But I think they must already know that blacks don't like them, so it's no surprise. And he's already said all these things before. He's just going further because he's being indulged by Alex Jones. And white people just, they don't know whether to push back on it or let him say what he wants. And, how is it? I mean, I think it'll look very bad for Trump. Okay, I'm thinking in terms of how bad it's going to be for Trump, having met Fuentes and Yay, and you think that just, well, Fuentes is just a whippersnapper. He's a college dropout. Why would anyone take him seriously? But I guess if Trump takes him seriously, then he may go far, or they're going to both crash and burn together.
So I'm finishing a Greek salad. I mean, if you're talking politics, you're just winning, and winning is based on numbers. And Kanye, yeah, he's one of the most famous people in the world. Certain loyalty, like he backed Trump. Fuentes is a strong Trump backer for years. Fuentes was at the January 6th event. He was going to those Trump events for months
Yeah, I
after
mean,
the election.
has
A
he?
lot of people were willing to get arrested for Trump.
Yeah.
So I mean, Trump really can't disavow. I mean, there's a certain
And
level
hasn't he
of.
got any grown-ups supporting him? I guess that's my question. Hasn't he got any grown-ups supporting him?
Well, obviously, it
Apparently
tens of
not.
millions of votes, but I mean, elections are won by thin margins, and you have to put together coalitions. And I mean, it's a tough place. I mean, to me, it makes Trump look bad because he's weak, because he can't stand up for his friend against criticism. He can't, just say Kanye West is my friend. I disagree with him about the Jews, but he's still my friend. We'll agree to disagree about the Jews, but instead he plays kind of like media. It'd be like secular cronyism or something. You'd be like, okay, I can't call Claire my friend because friends treat people the way you want to be treated, and if Claire's not my friend, it's not due to secular cronyism. It's because she doesn't treat me the way I want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
But besides for that, I could say, well, I could just agree to disagree about secular cronyism. That's has nothing to do with it. Even counter-Semitism, saying that, okay, like as a religious Jew in New York, I worked and had, God forbid, anti-Semitic friends, and we just agreed to disagree about the Jews, even though like I was Jewish and representing Judaism, but there were other things that we could base our friendship on. We could just agree to disagree, and then you're saying, well, does
And it
like
could
I was
still be a
talking about Charles Moskowitz and E. Michael Jones, that all of a sudden E. Michael Jones isn't Charles Moskowitz's friend, and saying, what, because he's anti-Semite? Like, what did he ever do wrong to you? Well, he's an anti-Semite, but is he a bad person? Did he ever wrong you? Yeah, like, well, no. I mean, maybe he thinks he spoke disparagingly about him behind his back or something like that, or if that's mutual. But generally Republican and free speech, it should just be straight up. I'll meet with whoever the hell I want to meet with.
well, yes.
I'll have dinner with whoever the hell I want to have dinner with. Like, no matter how despicable his opinions are. He committed no crimes. He said some crazy stuff. I disagree with the crazy stuff that he said. But what the hell does that have to do with our friendship? Why I got to stop dropping my friends because they say and believe in crazy stuff?
Yeah, but because...
But,
Well, I mean, I was thinking of your...
spineless and a coward that he couldn't have done that. He had to kind of, play. And then if he even, like, some realistic view on Fuentes is, like, Fuentes is one of my most, from Trump's, one of his most diehard supporters. He got arrested for him. He went to the rallies. He's been behind Trump for years. He has a base of possibly influence of hundred thousands of voters. It's possible that Fuentes is representative of hundreds of thousands of people, but certainly tens of thousands of people. And you say he could agree to disagree about the Jews and say, I like the Jews. I think all of his opinions about the Jews are largely inaccurate, but I still appreciate his support.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Just like doing business, like you said, like I'll do business with an anti-Semite. I disagree about your position on the Jews, but I appreciate your business. I appreciate your support. And then you're saying like, well, did the person wrong you? Did the person steal from you? Did the person say no? You just disagree about this issue. And
yeah, you can still have a conversation, and if you have a talk show, you actually want somebody who disagrees with you to keep coming back on, so you can attract both sides of the argument of the same subject. I would have thought. I mean, if you run some talk show or a YouTube channel,
and even professionally in the relations, and not even talk or YouTube, but say KanYe West is Trump's friend. KanYe West. Now he's going to say he can no longer be his friend because anti-Semitism. And I mean, like, God forbid that. I was watching this black conservative commentator and saying, like, the left never apologizes. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, they might say, we disavow the anti-Semitism, but they always back Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. They just disavow the anti-Semitism. And, even this, like, he shouldn't be given a seat at the table. I mean, one thing, like, Trump should have his own, spine and just be like, I will have whoever the hell I want at my table. Like the lying news and the media or whoever, complaining, even my Jewish friends, I will have whoever the hell I want at my table.
Did he say anything about that dinner?
No, he was spineless. So, I mean, I think really that, Trump being spineless is what's going to destroy him, not the anti-Semitism. If Trump just came out and, was just like, I will have whoever the hell I want at my club. And if he could just say something sensical to be like, I disagree with him, about the Jews. I
But
like
I
the Jews.
absolutely defend their right to say, that kind of
But even
thing.
like that, to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that, well, he doesn't have to defend their right to say it.
Because
Just
they
like
already have the
that,
right to
that
say it.
issue didn't come up. I didn't have them over to talk about the Jews. The famous people, there's a lot on the table, and saying the issue of the Jews didn't come up. And but yeah, I think that's what's going to make Trump look bad. And
So what
the
has he
question,
said about meeting Fuentes and yeah? Did he say anything about it? I'm afraid I haven't been following it.
I'm not. I think he just made a few uh, social media posts saying he didn't know who the guy was. Um, but the reality is Fuentes is one of his biggest supporters. He got arrested for him. That I mean, that that's to say that if Trump, I appreciate Nicholas Fuentes' support and getting arrested for me. However, I disagree with him about the Jews, and like for whatever reason, Trump can't make clear statements, because he's basically became a lying politician. He's like lying Ted, so Trump basically everything's a lie, everything's a spin, everything is based on some sort of positioning and political motive, and he can't just make a clear logical statement. Just like I appreciate Fuentes' support. I appreciate him getting arrested for me. I disagree with him about the Jews. Next question.
Yeah.
And but like no, it can't be done anymore. And you're like, my disagreements with Charles Moskowitz, generally, even the larger Jewish community, that God forbid, I think anti-Semitism is caused by Jewish behavior, and our overreaction to this is the largest cause of anti-Semitism. And
Yeah, I think you egg
this
each other
necessity,
on.
like KanYe West is one of the most popular people in the world. Besides for anti-Semitism, he's really done nothing wrong. And from that perspective, we say anti-Semitism should be enough wrong that he should be canceled, and that means that he's got 30 million followers on Twitter, and saying, "Look, he said bad things about a Jew. I'm a Jew, and it deeply hurts me." But to say that it's either us or him, and God forbid, a lot of people are gonna choose him because people don't like ultimatums, they don't like canceling people, they don't like censorship, and so Jews collectively are choosing the wrong strategy of censorship and escalation. And that's what I said, like really only Jews care about this, and then for Jews to try to make everyone else care about it, and even like God forbid, like Charles Moskowitz, like it's very difficult for a lot of Jews to comprehend that not all anti-Semites are bad people. That you say they might be wrong about anti-Semitism, wrong about the Jews. If that you want to say they're bad, but it doesn't mean that they uh, do a lot of other bad things. And so even like Nick Fuentes, he may not be a bad guy. He may not have a long list of things that he's done other than said some provocative statements. And like KanYe West, he's generally probably a pretty good guy. And then his level of anti-Semitism, where he started by just criticizing a handful of Jews, and by being accused of being an anti-Semite, he ends up embracing the anti-Semitic label, and saying that Jewish behavior causes anti-Semitism. We escalate this, and we're basically playing chicken. And like KanYe West isn't backing down, and so we're saying well, I'm a Jew, and I demand me or him immediately. You either unfriend KanYe West, or I'm going to unfriend you.
It's
And
so childish.
that's a very dangerous game for the Jewish people to be playing. And just say that to me it's nonsensical. That's why I even come onto YouTube and will speak out my opinion. But God forbid, I haven't heard a single person in the Jewish community say what I'm saying. I've heard some black conservatives say what I'm saying, and even some black conservatives saying I like the Jewish people, but KanYe West and Nicholas Fuentes' anti-Semitism doesn't really bother me, honestly. And even me as a Jew, like if they haven't committed any crimes, if you say they're beating people up, they're stealing money, that would bother me. But I don't really care what they're saying. Like honestly,
You've heard it all before, anyway.
yeah. So God forbid.
But it's just a hysteria of it. Did you watch the video by Joseph Cohen saying, "Oh, look at these anti-Semites of all races. You see
I
how
haven't seen a
excited
video
all
of
these
him for
white nationalists are and
I haven't seen
backing
him make a
Ye."
video for months. But he came back to because of KanYe West.
Yeah. I thought it was quite a good one with all the clips of Joel Davis and I forget the other names, but he was just saying, "Oh, look at these."
He had made a video for 4 months. He made a video about KanYe West.
Yeah. Do you want to see it? If I can find. Well, the thing is, you
Yeah,
won't be
I
able to
found
watch.
it. I mean, if you could play it live, you could go. You feel free, go ahead.
Um,
He's
yeah,
gonna
I
copyright
probably
it.
can't because it won't just play properly, so I won't. I'll just play the link, I suppose. But the gist of it was
You don't have to, but
the very excited, white people are excited because some black man said something about Jews, and they're all so excited. And then he went through all the excited white nationalists getting excited about Yay.
um, well, I'm not sure if they're. I mean, it's kind of like the lies, like the white nationalist, and so I forgot which commentator was saying, like, God forbid, like the Great Replacement, where just like neo-Nazi white nationalist Fuentes, and it's like, so like even the white nationalists have been replaced, where you have
Yeah, but by a black
Milo
black
Yiannopoulos,
man.
Nicholas Fuentes, and KanYe West are representative of the white nationalists.
Yes, I guess it's quite funny that white national, the immigrants, the non-whites have taken over white nationalism.
And um, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of hysteria. And I mean, okay, Joseph Cohn's making money off of this, so what benefit is saying, like, okay, like Jews are scared, and so they want someone to do something about it. So they give money to someone like Joseph Cohn, and he makes a video attacking people, and then it
And he makes
escalates.
the situation worse.
And well, saying then it escalates because like
Yes.
he thinks he's going to attack people, and they're not going to attack him back. I mean, God forbid, like didn't he get beat up in public? And
Cohen.
and I mean, he got beat up in public, and he basically got chased out of Speaker's Corner, and it's like, well, he's making videos attacking people, and so it's just a form of escalation. And
And bad for Jews, I would have thought.
well, if it's the Jewish strategy, and then to say, like Charles Moskowitz was, like decided to de-escalate his attacks on E. Michael Jones. He was attacking E. Michael Jones, calling him an anti-Semite. So E. Michael Jones stuck Rizzoli on him, and then he was going to attack Rizzoli as an anti-Semite. Then Rizzoli started making videos about him, and then Charles Moskowitz started getting scared.
Who is
And
Rizzoli? I'm a bit lost here with these names.
I mean, he's another Boston revisionist counter-Semite, but he specializes in Holocaust revisionism. I mean, he's got a small YouTube channel, and he spoke to Charles. I spoke to him also briefly, but it started escalating, and escalation leads to violence. So if I say something that Joseph Cohn doesn't like, and then he makes a video attacking me, and then I publicly attack him back, basically the only place it could go from there is violence. So they're either, so looking at what did people expect? Like KanYe West said things that the Jewish people didn't like. Say you could just left it at that. Like, yeah, he's just an entertainer. Who cares? But so the effort that I was on Adam Green and said, I think some Jewish organization were kind of like drunk off their own power, and said, like, we're gonna have you canceled, and that led to escalation. So you have forces where there's a lot of people who favor censorship, but the strongest group that favors censorship is probably the Jewish people. And the Jewish people are small people. There's certain power dimensions of media and banking, Jewish organizations. But the Jewish people are small people. So in Europe,
Ben Shapiro claimed
there's
that
probably a whole
KanYe
bunch of
isn't turning
forces that favor censorship and cancel culture. But in America, Jews are widely out of step with the wider public in terms of censorship and cancel culture.
Do
That
you
may not
think
be the case.
Reform and Orthodox Jews take a different view about anti-Semitism? Would you say Orthodox Jews are more accepting, or are they about the same about asserting their rights? I mean, okay, I get the impression that
Jews are
Orthodox
generally
Jews
more
are more
favored pro-censorship
philosophical.
than their political counterpart.
I'm
So
sorry?
say Orthodox Jews, right-leaning Jews, generally are more free speech than their left-wing Jewish counterparts. That they're more pro-censorship than their non-Jewish political counterpart. So, like a Jewish conservative like Charles Moskowitz favors a lot more censorship than non-Jewish conservatives. On that level, Orthodox Jews generally are less, less supportive of the ADL in cancer culture or censorship, but compared to their white counterparts, their right-wing counterparts, I would say across the board, just like immigration, like right-wing Jews are more pro-immigration than right-wing whites. Right-wing Jews are more pro-censorship than right-wing whites, and it's probably substantial, like the difference in terms of polling, where it's polar opposites. Like right-wing whites are like 70-80% against immigration. Right-wing Jews are 70-80% for immigration. Right-wing whites are like 70-80% against censorship. Right-wing Jews are 70-80% for censorship. So there's a huge mismatch between the larger white population and the Jewish population. There's plenty of reasons, sociological, historical reasons why Jews favor immigration and censorship, much more, or substantially at hugely different levels than our white counterpart.
Wasn't Dennis Prager complaining about censorship, but of him for discussing social conservatism and promoting it, and he said he got cancelled. He got into trouble over it.
Yeah, so Les Glassman got kicked off of YouTube recently. So I mean, God forbid, Les Glassman had interviews with like hundreds of Holocaust survivors. He was right wing, and he had faced strikes before. Like Lowell Gallen got kicked off of YouTube. Charles got kicked off of YouTube, and just the last few weeks, Les Glassman got kicked off of YouTube.
Who's Glassman?
He was the Lowell Gallen's streaming partner of Root and Branch till they
Okay.
broke up over COVID-19.
Uh-huh.
But he specialized in interviewing Holocaust survivors. He was the Jerusalem dentist, the blue-eyed man from South Africa.
Yeah, as you know, I follow Rabbi Mizrahi, and what he was complaining about was basically what British nationalists have been complaining about, having his meetings cancelled, having whoever hiring the venue for the meeting, threatened, and all kinds of things, and rabbis inviting him to talk in their synagogues, also threatened in some way, blackmailed. And there seems to be. I mean, okay, I know that people, Americans coming to Britain, some white nationalists, they get sent away, and they gave Rabbi Mizrahi the same treatment, and Rabbi Mizrahi said this was with the collusion of the chief rabbi, and this leads me to conclude that it's not really white or black. It's about social conservatives against social liberals, and that is a true line of the culture war. I mean, I think it's all red herring if you want to make it Jew and Gentile and male and female and whatever. It's really, I mean, the culture war has been expressed in terms of conservative and liberal for decades, hasn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, you have, I mean, certainly someone like Kanye West is a born again counter Semite because you're like, he has basically been working hand in hand with the Jews for 20 years. I mean, I would say till today that even currently, the majority of his business partners are Jews. That he got started with Rockefeller Records, and I mean, he said it himself that basically every single one of his business partners are Jews. Um, he's still business partners with Jared and Josh Kushner. Currently, till today, he's business partners with Jared and Josh Kushner. So there's a difference between um, historical, I mean, a lot of people claim Mark Collette looks Jewish, but I think Mark Collette was, like brought up in white national circles, like David Duke, or saying there's always been far right organizations in the West, and so there's been the level of what's not acceptable in urban university, politically correct culture, university, and God forbid, starting 2016, you have most of the leading counter Semites are people that previously knew and liked Jews. Like Nicholas Fuentes himself in high school, he was a Ben Shapiro fan. So I mean, he wasn't a neo-Nazi. He was a suburban Chicago kid that wanted to be like, um, Ben Shapiro. Said Kanye West uh, calls himself Jewish. That
Well, I suppose people can sort of.
he was working hand in hand. He was supposed to have a summit with Jared Kushner with blacks and Jews. That Jared Kushner had personally requested him. Like he was friends. He was hanging out with Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner was calling Kanye West his friend, and so it's like, God forbid it's a bad sign. Now it's saying the Jews want to cancel him. And if it's saying like, well, I thought he was your friend. And now you say, well, he was my friend until he said that comment. And now he must be canceled. And anyone who remains his friend is an anti-Semite too. And God forbid, it's just a horrible strategy. It's almost nonsensical. And even the hysteria, it almost begs for conspiracy theories. Just to understand, what's going on. 2 years ago, Kanye West is best friends with Jews, and now he's the biggest anti-Semite in the world. I mean, when you're looking, okay, E. Michael Jones and Kevin Barrett, I saw they had a conversation with President Ahmadinejad, former president, and like, even Ahmadinejad denies being an anti-Semite, but he's saying like, okay, obviously there's a lot of beef between Iran and Israel and world Jewry. And he was the president of Iran, leading military funding and worldwide counter-Semitism. But now you're talking, Nick Fuentes, who's just a kid who 5 years ago worshipped Ben Shapiro, and Kanye West, who just 2 years ago was Jared Kushner's best buddy, and was supposed to be hosting a summit of black and Jews.
And what happened exactly to sour the relationship?
Well, I think it's the Jewish hysteria, personally. I mean, there could have been something and it could have been resolved. Whatever it was, I think it's the cancel culture, the labeling as anti-Semitic, and then the embracing, like, you're an anti-Semite. And the person, well, maybe I am. And then they embrace it, and then they start teaming up with other people who've been labeled anti-Semitic by the Jews, like Cozy TV, where now you have the who's who of counter-Semitism, like E. Michael Jones and Ryan Dawson, and to some extent,
is Alex Jones known for being anti-Semitic? I hadn't noticed, but then I don't follow that closely.
Well, I think his ex-wife is Jewish, and like to some extent, like no, I mean, like 2016. So there's two aspects, like with the alt-right, that Trump, in order to win, needed the white nationalists and the anti-Semites to vote for him. And so there was, somewhat like a Tom, how's it going? Glib. So, I mean, like a lot of Jews have a hard time with like Charles Moskowitz, like, goes into like conniption fit just mentioning this. But I think, a lot of right wing Jews and even just political hacks understand the demographics. And it's like you win elections by getting 51% of the vote. And the only path for a Republican to win presidency and, some races, you need the vote of the anti-Semites and the racists. And, if you look at it like, I mean, we have the polling. And if you say like, at least 10% of America are reasonably, call like hardcore anti-Semites. And that, God forbid, that's like 30 million people. Besides like the 30 million people who like KanYe West, I would doubt that, KanYe West is one of the most popular people in the world. He's got 30 million followers on Twitter. I would guess that probably 2/3 or more of the people who like KanYe West are philo-Semitic. But saying there is the 30 million hardcore anti-Semites in America, and then there's probably 100 million. 1 out of 3 people in America are mildly counter-Semitic. But if you're talking in many districts to winning an election, where some districts might be stronger, it might be like 25% are relatively quite counter-Semitic. That especially if you're a Republican, some like the rural base, you need those people to vote for you. And so Trump, the people like, oh, Jared Kushner's his son-in-law, he supports Israel, or various things where they just see Trump in his blue eyes or his certain demeanors, and they think that he's on their side. And so I think Kushner and Trump's team knew that in 2016, that the only way Trump could win the presidency was not just the counter-Semites and racists. He also needed a certain element of the Indians and the Arab vote and the Hispanics. But you have, I mean, I don't know if you know what I'm saying. Just like the pure politics, that you got to get over 51%, and you have to build up a coalition, and the coalition is going to be diverse. And when you're just putting those numbers together, you could break them down into camps. And so if you're a Republican, you're like, okay, you need in this district, you need 30% of the Hispanic vote, 25% of the Jewish vote. You need the anti-Semitic and racist, 60% of the racist whites to come out and vote. And if you're a political hack, you just know those numbers. That's the only way that you could win an election. I mean, it's probably the same way in the UK. That like Labour or something like that.
Yeah, you would be.
You have the Palestinians, you have the anti-Israel Arabs, you have various camps, and they have to rally together, even though they don't like each other, to vote. And that's why politicians generally lie and make promises to a whole bunch of people. So like Trump dog whistles anti-Semitism when he's speaking to crowds that are anti-Semitic. And then he talks about how much he loves Jews and Israel when he's talking to Jewish crowds and various because that's what all politicians do.
Well, so the problem really is the operation of democracy.
Yeah, but the problem itself is democracy, because it's saying democracy means 51% and you win. It doesn't matter how you get that 51%. It doesn't matter that you lie and say a bunch of things that aren't true. It doesn't matter that you make promises that you're not going to keep. It doesn't matter that you're building up a coalition of people that don't like each other, because 51% and you win. And so that's the name of the game. So you could, I wouldn't even call that a cynical view on it. It's just factual, and political hacks, political advisors know this stuff. And that's like an election campaign manager. So there's a difference between policy once you get elected, how to get policy passed, legislation, to winning elections. But saying campaign managers, like Steve Bannon,
He
Jared
had
Kushner.
a Jewish wife, didn't he?
Yeah, he also had a Jewish wife, but I'm saying he would probably practical about that also, in saying that like Trump, you could win the anti-Semitic vote. Don't worry, just tell the Jews one thing, tell the anti-Semites a different thing. And if you're a Jewish Republican, I mean, you really just have to accept it. It's like I mean, I tried to tell it, like Charles Moskowitz, he's having like fantasies that like 30% of blacks are going to vote Republican. But like if you're a Jewish Republican, it's a negotiation. So you know that your candidate can only win if the anti-Semites also vote for them. And so there's some negotiation between the anti-Semites and the Jews. And if it's in a state, then it could be a political negotiation where you have the anti-Semitic leaders and you have the Jewish leaders, and both of you understand the system and the politics. And like, look, we don't want the Democrats. It's going to be worse for both of us if the Democrats win. So we both have to rally our base to vote to get our candidate to win. Then we have to negotiate some sort of compromise once they're in power. And really both sides will lie. So, the Jewish Republicans will lie to the Jews and say like, oh, they're not really anti-Semitic. And the anti-Semitic Republicans will lie to their base and say, oh, the politicians isn't making double promises to the Jewish community and isn't funded by wealthy Jewish donors, or isn't going to do everything Israel says. When the fact is that you can't win unless you get both of those bases. And I don't know the demographics in England, but I would assume it's the same way. For like Tory or the right-wing conservative branch, the conservatives need the anti-Semites to vote for them in England to win a majority, but they also need the support of the Zionist, the Republican Jews, the financial support, and maybe even the votes. There could even the votes of Jews in certain areas. And they have to negotiate some sort of deal. So the leaders of the Jews and the leaders of the anti-Semites will make some sort of brokered deal, and the politician will just lie to both sides.
It's also where you can find them, because a lot of white working class people who object to immigration, don't like the way politicians would just, go to mosques, because they know that if they get the mosque elder to vote for them, the mosque elder will tell his congregation to vote Labour or Conservative. And so it's very useful, been very important for these campaigning politicians to get the support of these particular groups. But because white people, the white working classes, they don't go to church. They only go to the pub. They can't be found, and they're too much trouble to individually talk to. So they tend to get left out.
That's generally what Trump gave the anti-Semites. So Trump gave the Jews basically everything we wanted on Israel, and he rejected the majority of our desires for immigration and censorship. So you're saying like Jewish Republicans, we wanted censorship and we wanted more immigration, but we cared more about Israel than that. And the counter-Semites cared more about immigration and censorship than they cared about Israel. So it's saying they were able to somewhat negotiate that, where the counter-Semites and the Jews both supported Trump. And then Trump gave the Jews basically everything we wanted on Israel. And then he gave the counter-Semites as much as he could give them on immigration. And it's probably like that in England also, where certain issues where the right-wing Jews, they care more about Israel than the immigration policy in England, and probably the counter-Semites on the right in Britain care more about immigration than like Brexit or something like that than Israel. So the right-wing politician could get the base of the financial and political support, media support of the Jewish community and the counter-Semitic vote by giving the Jewish community everything we want on Israel, but not ceding to our demands on immigration.
What's this I hear about AIPAC being more full of Christians than they are than it is full of Jews? Is that true, or?
Well, I mean,
Well, Christian
that's
Zionists.
also
Christian
election.
Zionists are more into APAC than Jews, or they're more Christian Zionists than there are Jews. I
Well, I'm
don't.
going to say it's a double talk because you win elections by votes, and so there's tens of millions of Christians. Christians are more important for elections. Zionist Christians are more important for elections. There's some uh, Christian financial support, um, but it's more about numbers for elections.
Yes, I think that
So
the political parties are.
the minority of Jews support Israel. So you have an element in America. So you have the element of very concerned Jews, like modern Orthodox Jews, organizational Jews, pro-Israel Jews that care a lot about Israel. There's probably only 1 million of those in the United States, and those might disproportionately have more money and power and be willing to use that money and power in politics. You're talking about a maximum of 1 million people. And those 1 million people live almost exclusively in, like New York, Los Angeles, Miami, a handful of places, as opposed to possibly 50 million, if you call them Christian Zionist evangelicals that support Israel and the Republican Party that you need the Christian evangelicals to win elections. You need you may or may not need the Jewish money, political support, but you need the Christian votes. And so, APAC, you have to win elections. So you could there's certain levels of having influence with politicians, giving money to politicians, um, trying to have politicians on your side on both sides. But at the end of the day, you have to negotiate with the Christian evangelicals. And, it's like I said, the negotiate, because reality is, there's a reasonable strain of counter-Semitism among Christian Zionists. But the Christian Zionist will basically give us everything that we want on Israel. And they still might oppose immigration or various issues that even conservative Jews disagree with. That's the negotiation of winning elections and saying Jews don't bring votes to the table. Christians bring votes to the table.
Yes, because of their numbers, because the British political classes are also conflicted. On the one hand, they want to pander to Jews. On the other hand, particularly in the Labour Party, they know that the Asians that the Labour brought in were are Labour Party members, and they hate Jews. So, but what's interesting is that it is Labour that is being accused of anti-Semitism, and it's the Conservatives who are accused of being Islamophobes. So I thought that was an interesting
And
development.
the accusation of anti-Semitism is largely a political tool. So, I mean, generally, the accusation of anti-Semitism is only valuable in the U.S. on the right and not on the left. That you could be labeled as an anti-Semite and still win elections on the left. It's more difficult to be labeled an anti-Semite and win elections on the right.
Yes. Yes, because I suppose people, well, young people anyway, are kind of indoctrinated into hating, social conservatives. And therefore they will forgive people of the left for all kinds of things, but if the same trait is shown in a conservative, they seize on it and they make it a hanging offence, I guess.
It's the decline of America. I mean, really, just saying our country's going to shit. The real crisis is incompetency. So of all the problems, you're saying the biggest problem is Trump and his association with mild anti-Semitism. KanYe West and Nicholas Fuentes, as opposed to the crisis of hypocrisy. The budget deficit, the crime wave,
Yeah, these are distractions.
inflation.
People getting their feelings hurt.
It's just a deflection as as and even just the language of I was listening to Mike Pence and like the corruption of the language, like a seat at the table. It's saying like it's not a seat. There's no table to have a seat at. You're a public servant. You're not an elite that like is deciding who gets included and not included. It's a public service that you're not doing. And
Sorry,
it's like Trump,
what
Trump
was Mike Pence talking about?
which is the language that he chose to use. Like Trump was wrong to give KanYe West a seat at the table. So like as a celebrity or something, like what seat at the table
It
is.
wasn't a negotiating table. It was just a seat at the dinner table, right?
Well, it means like you're like some acceptance into like upper echelon social climbing. It's just a sign that all our politicians are crooked,
Well,
that they that
corruption
they
of the
use politics
language
for
is a
their own
corruption of
personal gain.
thought.
And it's saying like public service, like like if you're sweeping the streets and you don't ask the people like whether what their beliefs. You're saying like take a broom and help out. I don't care what you believe. And our politics is so corrupted that no one looks at it as like a public service. And I mean, my main diagnosis, the problem is representative democracy from two levels. One, just the nature of democracy, and that the path to power is winning a popularity contest. And once you win the vote, you have the seat for 2, 4, 6 years. 2 years for Congress, 4 years for presidency, 6 years for the Senate. So all you have to do is win the contest, and then you're in power for multiple years. And representative that one person represents so many millions of people, and it's guaranteed incompetence because one person can't understand all those issues. And think like like generally like KanYe West, Donald Trump are not qualified. They'll go down there, but maybe both successful businessmen. Even before it could be KanYe West. Like God forbid, Donald Trump wasn't really a billionaire. KanYe West, he's not a billionaire anymore. But like before he lost his Adidas contract, KanYe West was actually richer than Donald Trump. But most politicians get to there by being a lawyer. The general qualification for being a politician, you're going to legislate, you have to understand the law. But the issues like engineering, like as an engineer, politicians have almost no understanding about engineering. So our infrastructure is going to hell. Business background, medical background, and then to have one person that is going to vote on all of these various issues, even though usually they don't have expertise on anything.
Yeah, they don't even want the job. In the UK, yes, you have Minister of
What they want is
Transport
a path
or whatever.
to power.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean
so
they
that's like
only
the
want the
seat at the
top
table
tops.
idea. They don't want to do a public service and benefit society. They want to get a seat at the table on the path to power and social climbing and wealth. And like even Pence, supposedly like the civil-minded public service Republican, is still kind of like like, oh, I'm a celebrity, I got a seat at the table. You can't let that guy get a seat at the table. As opposed to public service. I don't care what the hell you believe. If you're going to help out, I'll accept your help. We need your help. As opposed to like, what is it exactly that you're getting in on? So like you shouldn't be getting in on anything. I mean, from like a pure matter of civics, like when you enter politics, you're not getting in on anything. You're doing a public service, but saying you can't allow this guy to get in on it. What exactly is it that he's getting in on? He's getting in on corruption, thievery, the profiting off the downfall of the country. And it's like that on both the Democratic and Republican side. And that's why you see like, Trump's a spineless coward, Biden's a spineless coward, all of them are.
Mm-hmm.
And really the problem is representative democracy. There's not any
Great, I'm glad
solution.
we're so agreed. But you do know that Washington disapproved of political parties, don't you? In his farewell speech, he did say it quite clearly.
Yeah, but I'm saying Madison or whatever, Washington was just the first president. He was the most popular person in America at the time. He wasn't he rose through the military and being popular. That's why he was the first president. The Constitution, the system was more developed by Madison and Jefferson and
But
Hamilton.
America was a one-party state under the Federalist Party for about 12 years, wasn't it?
Well, I think there were always elections, and it just Washington was the first because he was the most popular person in the country at the time. But afterwards, there were always elections, and there might have been parties, but it was basically the popularity contest where you rose to power through winning the election.
What is
And
it?
so,
What does it mean when okay, I've had conversations with Americans and they say America's not a democracy, it's a republic. What do they mean by that? Are these Americans saying that we reject democracy, we just want a republic? I mean, like the People's Republic of China, it's a republic, but it's not a democracy. What do Americans mean when they say that? I've never
because the
really been
system,
quite clear.
you don't get to vote on issues. You get to vote on a person who decides all the issues for a period of time, and then you have the electoral college system. But more, I refer to it as, there's also the concept of the Republican, but it's saying it's representative democracy where you vote for one person to represent you over a period of time.
On
You
a
don't
range
actually,
of issues.
you don't actually get to vote on issues.
Because that would be direct democracy, the Athenian kind, yes. When all these Athenians would go and show off hand and go to war or not go to war or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's ironic that Elon Musk did the poll on reinstating people, and Elon Musk's said on Mars if there was a system he would use direct democracy, and now Elon Musk owns Twitter and has used a form of direct democracy, and so Facebook, so to say, has an appointed committee of elites. So if you have a problem on Facebook, you could appeal it, but you're appealing it to unelected committee of elites, as where Elon Musk, at least in the twice, has based policy on, so to say, direct democracy. So in the state like Michigan just had abortion on the ballot, but there's so many layers that you vote for president, and then the president appoints the Supreme Court justice to saying what would it mean if you democratically direct democracy on the important issues at hand. But that's not the system. You're just like saying immigration. A lot of the alt-righters will say how the majority of the population is always against immigration, but immigration always gets increased, and it's because representative democracy, and you have to vote for a candidate. You can't vote for the issue, and by the time the candidate gets into power, usually that's more. They have to be popular, but it's also about money and media and corporate support, and the wealthier media class is more likely to be globalist and favor immigration. So of the issues that generate like immigration, where the majority of the population usually is against increasing immigration, but
Yes.
immigration almost always gets increased because you don't get to vote on immigration. You only get to vote on a candidate, and there's so many other issues that you can't vote on.
So it gets diluted.
On immigration.
Yeah, I remember reading about Russia during, I think it was the emancipation of serfs, or it was something that arose during what was written about in War and Peace, and they were saying, well, Russia was full of foreigners, and the Tsar allowed it, presumably because they thought the locals were no good, and that's. And then they were saying, well, a lot of these foreigners coming to Russia, they're all right, they work hard and that kind of thing.
The elites are always more likely to have a globalist perspective, because I'm elite because I'm special, I'm better than the masses, and my peers are not the masses who I'm better than. God forbid, my peers are the other elites around the globe, and for any nature that so any political system, the people in power are going to arise from the elites, and the elites are almost always going to have a globalist tendencies.
I suppose there's always been this tension between the plebs and the patricians. I mean, they had that problem in Republican Rome, didn't they? We know that the plebs occasionally would object to their working conditions, and they would all move out of Rome, leaving the patricians to clean their own toilets, and then and then they would get better conditions, and then they would come back. But the only way they could do that was to actually leave Rome, so they couldn't be made to do stuff anymore. But what I found quite interesting was this case called Church of the Holy Trinity versus United States. I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically, this case was the Church of the Holy Trinity versus United States. It was a decision by the Supreme Court of the United States regarding an employment contract between the Church of the Holy Trinity, New York, and an English Anglican priest. And this is only two sentences. It says, 1885 law. Contracts to import labour were forbidden by federal law, and specifically by the Alien Contract Labour Law, an act of Congress passed in 1885 prohibiting the importation and migration of foreigners and aliens under contract or agreement to perform labour or service of any kind in the United States, its territories, and the District of Columbia. And when I came across this case, I thought, wow, it's the same thing. And this was in way back in 1885. And even then, the Americans were objecting to alien labour. And this was a case when Justice Brewer was asked if America was a Christian nation, and this is to do with the church. Basically, the Anglican Church of the Holy Trinity imported this preacher, and the people objecting to it were saying, this breaks the Alien Contract Labour Law, and I think the Justice Brewer said, it's we are a Christian nation, so it should be allowed. But they were saying you can't even hire an Anglican priest and pay for his passage.
You could pop in the link if you want.
Yeah,
I remember we talked to Patrick Little in 2018, and 2016, you had the alt-right and the counter-Semites that avowed themselves to the system. So generally, the far right doesn't trust the system, doesn't think that there's a political solution. But under Trump, you had enough of them come out to vote that Trump was able to win narrow margins, and the hope that they would at least get some of their demands, like the immigration ban, the Muslim ban. Even though obviously he was Trump was philo-Semitic, but Trump wasn't able to legislate, or the immigration ban was shot down. And then 2018, we have Patrick Little, and Patrick Little was just a one-issue, California governor, and he disappeared from the scene. But he was a one-issue person on counter-Semitism, God forbid, on expelling the Jews, where basically he didn't really have a platform other than remove Jews from power. And to some extent, Nicholas Fuentes, the alt-right, which it's unclear what the issues were, under Trump, or the alt-right, it was like the new ban of, the alt-right that had gays and blacks and Jewish Republicans, and whatever made us somewhat right-leaning, that, we would have been considered under the big banner alt-right. And then, the Richard Spencer and the hardcore whites would have said, you're alt-right. but the alt-right basically was pushed back to previously to being an anti-establishment movement, that there's no solution, God forbid, but there's no salvation for white nationalism within the U.S. governmental system. It requires the collapse of the U.S. government, to the resurrection of the alt-right. And if it's Nick Fuentes, where you had Christian nationalism, even Rundle, you're just like not really some clear legislative, you're just like Christian nationalism. If we just have Christians in power, everything's going to be okay, even though I have no idea how to legislate, or no idea about how to run a business, or actually run the government, even if we took control. To God forbid, counter-Semitism. And if you gave parallels to God forbid, Nazi Germany, where the point where the coalition is just saying Jews have too much power, and the single issue of the political coalition is removing Jews from power. And so, God forbid, could be bad for Jews in that sense, that there's a broad base of Americans that are maybe more politically activated. So there's counter-Semitism has always had a broad base in America, but not as a political movement. But if under KanYe West, or it was like some rebranding of Patrick Little, where basically the main one issue political movement is counter-Semitism, removal of Jews from power in America, where it said, well, Jews have too much power in America, God forbid. And I'm running for president on the platform that we need to remove Jews from power. And KanYe West saying God forbid, Jews are popular, Jews will push back, but counter-Semitism is pretty popular. So Patrick Little, even relatively just being a nobody, Patrick Little was a nobody. He was a former veteran, he was a Marine. He had some sort of job like in IT where he was making tens of thousands of dollars a year, but he had a boat or something. But Patrick Little maybe had tens of thousands of dollars in the bank. He was driving around the country sleeping in his car and had no money, and was begging super chats. Even Richard Spencer, maybe he has a trust fund, but even Richard Spencer had no basis. He was bankrupted, as opposed to possibly KanYe West would have the bankroll and the backup where he will be able to rally the counter-Semites on a one issue vote that Jews have too much power. And that's why I say, God forbid, we created KanYe West, because really KanYe West is a philo-Semite. He, I said, only had issues with probably 10 Jews. When KanYe West first started going on his rambles, he was just a dude, a black entertainer that had issues with about 10 Jews. And, he spoke about them as the Jews, and then the Jewish community at large chose the side of the handful of Jews that KanYe West had problems with. And now it's forced it to be KanYe West has a problem with all the Jews, and now KanYe West is teamed up with the other people that have problems with all the Jews.
My daddy's bigger than your daddy.
Well, I would say we just make a point that saying KanYe West was a philo-Semite. KanYe West knows more Jewish millionaires than probably even Jonathan Greenblatt. KanYe West knows more powerful Jews than almost any Jew you could imagine. Maybe there's a hand like Netanyahu or whatever, but KanYe West knows thousands of Jewish millionaires. KanYe West knows tens of Jewish billionaires. KanYe West knows more people in Hollywood than Luke Ford, than powerful people, and he had a problem with just a handful of them.
And now he has a problem with all of them.
And it's saying that if he becomes the one issue crusader, that from a political point of view, that Jews need to be removed from power, whatever conceptually how people understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But Kanye West saying like, I can't allow these Jews to do this to me, even though he means 5 to 10 Jews. Um, but in order for him to extract revenge on the 5 to 10 Jews who probably legitimately wronged him, just saying from like a like as a Philo-Semite, someone trained to be a rabbi, makes my living, makes my career, kind of defending the Jews. I'll even conceivably give Kanye West the benefit of the doubt that these handful of Jews that he thinks screwed him probably did screw him. And and when he said, the Jews screwed him, if he only meant the handful of Jews that screwed him, he's probably right. But like those Jews pay the ADL in Jewish organizations. They label Kanye West an anti-Semite, and then all the Jews around the country are like, oh man, like anti-Semitism is increasing. And because people don't look at it like, oh, anti-Semitism is caused by bad Jewish behavior, they think like anti-Semitism comes out of the thin air and has nothing to do with bad Jewish behavior. And all of a sudden they think that, the reason anti-Semitism is because some, wild man, Kanye West, is saying loose things and escalates it. And anti-Semitism is popular. So there's unquestionably, like any, the ADL's own statistics is that there are 30 million people at least in America that share the views of Kanye West, like or Nick Fuentes, like to an extreme level. Like I was saying, like the ADL's like 10 questions, and like 10% of America answer like 7 to 10 of those questions affirmative, like the questions that if you answer yes, you're an anti-Semite. So I was saying, like from the ADL's, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I mean it's a perception of Jewish power, which is
yeah. So it's like 10% of Americans answer more than half of those questions. So if you just like Jews have more loyalty to Israel than America, like almost 50% of Americans answer that one yes. But like 50%
I mean, how
of
can it be
America.
measured anyway? I mean,
Right, I'm just saying that's the way the ADL measures
yeah,
it,
yeah.
and it's saying that there's like 10% of Americans that answer like 7 out of 10 of those questions as yes, and even Kanye West at this point probably only answers 5 out of 10 of those questions as a yes. But saying that if a figure makes it a point to stand up against the Jews, there's probably 30 million people in America who are going to back him, and it puts the Jews in a bad situation. Then you have your neutral people who are like, honestly, I like the Jews, but I'm not going to turn on Kanye West just because of anti-Semitism. He has to do something more wrong than that. And if it's like Nick Fuentes, like your average person, even me as a Jew, you're saying like, okay, you're anti-Semite, but did you break any laws? Did you do anything wrong? And so if you're an anti-Semite, you didn't do anything wrong. I just disagree with you about the Jews, but you still didn't do anything wrong. And so probably like Nick Fuentes and Kanye West, E. Michael Jones, maybe Ryan Dawson, they probably didn't do anything wrong. They're just, I mean, if you want to call them anti-Semites, they're just anti-Semites, but they didn't really do anything wrong besides harboring anti-Semitic beliefs.
Which is allowed.
Well,
I mean, you're allowed to
that's the
dislike
problem the
people
Jewish community is
and
getting
say
into,
things against
is
them.
we don't want to let that be allowed. We don't want to say like, we don't want to look at it. Well, what did Kanye West do wrong? Well, he's an anti-Semite. Well, what else? And it's like, you got to reach for it. Well, what else did he do wrong besides being an anti-Semite? Like, well, he said that thing about George Floyd, or so like the black community is extremely unlikely to punish their own just for anti-Semitism. And so if the Jewish community
it's only white people who do that for some reason.
Well, not really. Like, I mean, because as in really,
white people punish. Well, Gentile West.
it's really only
West punish each
politicians and
other.
businessmen who have large amounts of dealings with Jews. So, I mean, like generally,
I think it's a form of virtue
generally only
signaling.
generally only Jews care about anti-Semitism.
No, I think that there are people who
I mean, the
like to
Gentiles, like the
use the rules
politicians,
against each
do it
other.
in reaction
It's like,
to
oh,
the
you
Jewish
said the
demand.
wrong word. That it means you're stupid and I'm smarter than you. It's that kind of.
I'm not saying that
maybe
Gentiles don't care
thoughtless.
about anti-Semitism, like they don't notice it or they don't disagree, but it's only a big deal to Jews. So, like, if you're in an all-white place and someone makes a racist comment about blacks, you might
Oh, you
like
cut out.
person for doing it. If you're in an area with blacks or something, so if you're among a place where there's no Jews and someone says something anti-Semitic, it could be that 6 out of 10 goyim will be like, nah, I disagree, I like the Jews, but they're not going to ostracize their anti-Semitic friend or family member because they're anti-Semitic. Um, but so the Jew they're just going to disagree. The Jews are the ones who are going to make the demands that are, say like, you have to punish this person for his anti-Semitism. You can't just disagree with him and still be his friend. And that's why I say your average Gentile um, doesn't want to have an ultimatum forced upon them, where the Jews are going to say it's either us or your anti-Semitic friend. And in the case of an ultimatum, I would guess even half of goyim will drop the Jews. In that case, where it's like, you either unfriend your anti-Semitic your friend, or I'm not going to be your friend anymore. That I would guess probably half of goyim would just be like, fine, like, I don't accept your ultimatum. You want to unfriend me, fine, but I'm not going to unfriend my anti-Semitic friend just because they're anti-Semitic.
But Jews accuse each other of anti-Semitism. I've heard you being accused. Well, you and Charles accuse each other of anti-Semitism, don't you? Or he has accused you.
Yeah, because it's a loose word, and it's saying, really, if you're just saying you're bad for the Jews. So it's saying like, okay, like you're saying like Joseph Cohen, and saying like he's bad for the Jews. Making that video is bad for the Jews. It's going to increase Jew hatred, not decrease it. And then Joseph Cohen's looking at me and he's saying, you're bad for the Jews. You're increasing anti-Semitism. So like, yeah, I mean, if you just mean
I think the problem is
anti-Semitism,
these advocacy groups, don't you? I mean, they have to kind of, give a reason for existence. So they have to say, "Ooh, I see anti-Semitism under this bush and that bush and the bush across the road, and therefore I am needed, and you should pay me and donate to my, wonderful anti-Semitism advocacy group, well, anti-Semitism advocacy group."
yeah, but that's, God forbid, when I first started doing this, and like like Kevin Barrett, like a handful of people reached out to me to speak to me, and they were like, like, you got to speak to like the Jews and tell them to like stop trying to ruin my life, and like the ADL, and these were people who had been on, that so to say, were accepted enemies of the Jewish people. They were already on hate list of the ADL. And like, I never thought that much about it, but here these people are saying like, like, okay, you seem like a reasonable Jew, but like, these Jews, they're really trying to ruin my life. And then even Angelo Gage, speaking to him, like, that guy was sleeping on a gun, and and he
Who is
was,
this?
I mean, he was a counter Semite in the U.S. that he was on the Brundle show.
Oh, right.
He still streams a little bit. He was also a former Marine, and he was head of some national youth organization, not Patriot Front, but one of these national right-wing organizations that it was
But the
only
more you
mildly
tell them not to do it, the more they'll want to do it. It's almost as if they can't
they're saying
help
that the Jews were
themselves.
going after him. The Jews were regularly posting, and then there's Jews making threats. Like, a Jew sees a post, like, oh, here's our anti-Semite of the week, and then a random Jew's looking at that and then trying to ruin their life, and then that guy's sleeping on a gun, and then speaks to a guy like me, and it's like, look, you got to tell the Jews to back off, before someone gets hurt, and so like, God forbid, it's like, like, okay, like, I mean, I don't know who Joseph Cohn just made a video of, but like, he's saying, one of these guys contacts Doooovid. He's like, look, the Jews are after me, and like, like, you got to get them to back off or someone's going to get hurt. And they're looking at it saying like, well, I mean, some of these guys, like, guys are pretty violent, and you're saying like, well, what am I going to do? Like, no, I'm a Jew, I'm against you. You're an anti-Semite, I'm against you. But like, this guy's already sleeping on a gun, and I think that's what Charles Moskowitz and Rizzoli, he backed off on Rizzoli because Rizzoli is always saying like, he's already sleeping on a gun, and he thinks it's going to be a Jew. Like, relatively, he's sleeping on a gun, and when he hears some sound at night, he's having nightmares that it's Jews trying to kill him. And, so when he's looking at it, like, oh no, another Jew made a video about me. I got to buy another gun. And saying,
Well,
when Jews
that's
are looking at this,
confirmation bias, isn't it? I mean,
well, it's escalation. No, I'm saying it's escalation
and
of conflict.
escalation,
And it's saying, like Jews are looking at it the same way. And it's like Ukraine and Russia. Escalation leads to escalation. Rhetoric,
yeah, and the more you complain about
unchecked
something,
rhetoric leads to violence. Violence leads to more violence. And that's what happened in Russia. And that's what's happening with Judaism. It needs to be de-escalated, and cancel culture, censorship is a form of escalation.
Well,
I
the
mean, it's
First
even like,
Amendment needs to be respected, but it appears that Americans aren't that keen on it anymore.
well, no, I mean, Jews definitely aren't that keen on it. So that's also an
Yeah,
escalation.
and it
Like
seems
you're
that the
saying
Gentile just
that
can't stand up for any principle
that the cause of
anyway.
anti-Semitism is Jewish behavior, and is saying that Jews are trying to limit free speech because we're scared, and we're scared of anti-Semitism, and we're scared of, God forbid, Holocaust and bad things happening to us, and so your
Have you
average
heard of this?
Gentile it causes anti-Semitism that we're pushing for censorship. So you could have
Yes,
a Gentile like Trump. It'd be like nah, I love the Jewish people. I understand the Jews are scared, and the Jews are pushing for censorship because we're scared, and we hear anti-Semites and we think we're going to get beat up, or the country's going to turn against us. We're pushing for censorship, and like, don't worry, like Jews, I like you Jews, but like censorship, you just gotta bite the bad words. Like, people are going to say bad things about you, people are going to heckle you. Um,
yeah, but there is
but
no leadership amongst the Gentiles, which is why,
well, it's double speak.
everybody, the loudest voice gets
Well, I mean, because they
heard.
all lie. Because like Trump, the Gentile leadership lies, and they'll say one thing to the Jews, and then they'll say something else to the Gentiles. So that they'll be like, "Yo, the Jews, yeah, we're working on censorship. Like, yeah, we're thinking, like, yeah, you're right about that." And then like, they'll be around their Gentiles, and they'll just sit quietly as people make anti-Semitic comments, as opposed to being strong to their Gentiles and saying, "I love the Jewish people." Like, there's a honest group conflict. Jews support censorship. That's not our value. We support free speech. There's a reason, like immigration, saying like like Joseph Cohen's always denying that Jews support immigration, but it's saying, just saying, like,
Well, I mean, the
like,
supporting more. I mean, a lot of them
but
are
it's saying
very
Jews
nervous
support
about
censorship.
Muslim
Jews support
immigration, and they
immigration.
don't
That's part
like
of
it.
our group conflict, group strategy. You don't have to be an anti-Semite because you disagree with the Jews about censorship and immigration. But I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, the words like anti-Semitism needs to be properly defined, and there will be people pushing for a wider and ever wider definition, and those who don't. But I mean, under the First Amendment, it should be that you can't say what you like about somebody, unless it is defamatory or incites violence and crime. I mean, it's very simple, but people can't seem
well,
to.
incites violence is. I mean, the legal legalities. I mean, that's the Jews will come from a legalistic perspective. It's like, look, like, if you're publicly causing people to have a negative view about the Jews, or if you're leading a crusade in your personal battle with even just a handful of Jews who you have conflict with, that that might cause.
But yeah, it's just a Gentile. They're so completely unable to formulate arguments to defend themselves. There's something actually wrong in the head with them. I don't know if you've heard the latest thing about.
There's something wrong in the head with everybody. That's what I'm saying. Like, Jews, we can't just admit we're scared. So it's
Well, I mean,
we're
obviously
scared,
you're scared, but
and,
I'm trying
and
to
so we're
tell you
acting
about.
reactionary based on our fear, and like, we're lashing out, pushing for censorship and cancel culture,
Yeah, which
and
which
we're
makes it
exasperating.
worse.
So we're exasperating anti-Semitism due to
by
our
censoring it, because it's like, okay, there's a pressure cooker, you actually need to release the pressure and not, turn the screw tighter.
yeah. I mean, so I mean, it's very frustrating for me because I see it happening, and I see like I mean, God forbid, it'd be better role of anti-Semitism, but then the larger Jewish reaction strategy, increasing anti-Semitism, and then like Adam Green, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and
Have you heard of this thing called complementary schismogenesis?
I don't think so. I mean, I could hear from the words that might be a nice nice way of saying what we're saying.
Yeah, yeah, because it's basically you try to stop, you try to accomplish a certain objective in order to stop a certain behavior, but just by your trying to stop it, you make it worse, and the other side is doing the same thing to you too, because you're not communicating properly. So an example would be, there are two people. One of them is talking too loudly, and the other is talking too softly. And the one who is talking too loudly, the one who thinks the other person is talking too softly, is talking louder and louder in the hope that the person talking too softly will follow his example, and the person talking too softly is lowering their voice, more and more, in order to encourage the other person to talking too loudly to talk softer. And you get this other person shouting and the other person whispering, and that's not the situation you want.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
there's a
an
time saying
example.
like scared. What did the Jewish people do? I mean, without a conspiracy, saying, well, Jews are scared because of history of persecution, and so when they see publicly negative views or all these stories that may be falsely being amplified by Jewish organizations of bad things happening to the Jews, there's just like a natural fear that Jews have that's possibly irrational. And then there's the legitimate, like say, okay, where from the counter-Semitic perspective, that Jews are scared because we're pushing for things that the majority of the population doesn't want. And if it's censorship or immigration, like E. Michael Jones, if you talk like abortion, it could be that abortion is actually something the majority of the population wants. And like the mismatch between the Jewish people and the general population on abortion is actually minimal.
I
The
think the
mismatch,
problem is that
well,
the
I'm saying the
Gentile.
mismatch between the Jewish people on immigration and censorship is enormous. It's probably 50 points. It's saying like if you're looking at a polling between the mismatch between the Jewish people and the larger population in an issue like abortion, it's probably only like 20 points. If you're looking at the mismatch between the Jewish people and the general population on immigration or censorship, it's probably 50 points. And you see from a perspective that okay, we're scared, and we think that it's in our interest to have censorship. So if it's like immigration, it's like you'll thank me for it. Like you're just wrong, Goy. Even though you don't want immigration, you're wrong. You're wrong, Goy, and you'll thank me for it later. But are we honestly saying that about censorship? So if we honestly feel about immigration that like, okay, I don't support
It's just
immigration
that you guys get your way, or you're perceived to get your way all the time, and the Gentile is just saying, well, you're obviously up to something because you always get your way, and oh crap.
well, no, because
Politicians
we
never give
disproportionately make up
us anything that we want. It's all shut up.
yeah, but then you circle back to the other issue where you're saying, well, we always get our way because we disproportionately make up the elite, Jewish power,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, and there is no one to control you, obviously,
then
because
you
you
have the
always get
pushback
your
of
way.
where Jewish power is being exerted on something that the populace doesn't want. There'll be a
Yes, and
pushback.
the
So I'd say like
populace is
abortion is a small difference.
unrepresented by any competent
Yeah, so
leadership.
censorship is probably might be the God forbid the straw that breaks the back. So that's what I say we have, like I mentioned Patrick Little, or now like the alt light KanYe West, Nick Fuentes coalition where basically the overall issue is Jews need to be removed from positions of power. And saying, well, why do Jews need to be removed from positions of power? Because Jews are pushing things on the population that the population doesn't want. And the reason why the Jews are successful at
Yeah,
implementing
because I
things on the
think that the
population that
Gentile
the
leadership
population
is
doesn't
so
want,
stupid
well,
and
is
so
because the Jews
incompetent.
is because of Jewish power, and therefore you have a political platform of removing Jews from power. And that, basically what happened with the Nazis, that their main issue was the removal of Jews from power. And that's what you see happening um, with the disintegration of the alt-right, where the alt-right in theory had issues that didn't have anything to do with counter-Semitism, but now the reemergence of the alt-right as a political movement
Yeah, because
is,
they're having a problem with liberalism, and that is the problem. And but everybody's still using this thing
well,
called
no, I'm saying
liberalism, including
the
the
problem
Jews who
is
are
Jewish
mostly
power.
liberal.
Well, I'm saying that God forbid, from the KanYe West Nicholas Fuentes coalition, that uh, the problem as they perceive it is Jewish power, and the political solution is a political ends of removal of Jewish power.
Yes, yes. I mean, if you want to, focus on individuals and groups, but I'm saying that the system, that the problem is systemic, and I think you were agreeing with me earlier that it is the operation of representative democracy that forces all these politicians to lie and make false promises, and when people are disappointed, they will obviously blame the Jews, or if there were no Jews around, they would be blaming whoever is doing better than they are.
Well, I mean, yeah, of course, the elites always get blamed,
Yeah.
but I mean, Jews
Yeah, so even if there
disproportionately
were no
make up the
Jews, or
elite.
even if
Right?
there
Like
were no
at the high
blacks,
echelons of the elite, Jews make up, probably about 20% of the elites.
yes, because they've been in living in the
You could
West
give a
for
reason by
centuries.
saying that if from the Kanye level, if he's open, but it would just say it is what it is that Jews make up about 20% of the upper echelons of the elite. That's why I say like Jews as a management class, and that at a certain point, anti-Semitism becomes a useful political strategy, and if a person has a political platform based on anti-Semitism, where basically it's just a single issue, where the only issue is
Yeah, yeah, because then,
anti-Semitism.
then they'll say all our problems
10%
will
of the
be solved if
population,
we kick the Jews
this point,
out.
10%
And
of the
here we go
population would back
again.
it. But I
Yeah,
mean,
and
so
and
Kanye
and
West has a lot of money. So I mean, historically, like Patrick Little says, they all right. Richard Spencer begging for super chats online. Um, like even the Minister Farrakhan or various people. Um, Kanye West has a lot of money, already has a large platform that would be substantially different. That so if Kanye West just keeps on going around, basically a political platform of removing Jews from power, there's a lot more. There's tens of millions of people who are going to like that message in America, even though the majority of America is Philo-Semitic.
yeah, because blacks hate Jews more. I would suggest.
Yeah, I mean, even according to
Because
ADL,
it's always the
but
lower
ADL's
classes who
own
hate them
data,
more, right?
ADL's own data shows that white Gentiles in America have the least amount of anti-Semitism of any group. The Hispanics
They
actually
hate
have more.
Asians too, the blacks.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, well,
because I mean they attack them,
Hispanics,
and
Hispanics, and Arabs test higher on anti-Semitism than blacks, but blacks, like have almost double the amount of
so the
anti-Semitism.
lower you are in society, the more there are people above you to envy and hate. I mean that's how it's always worked,
There's
hasn't
other
it?
reasons, but I mean that's a large reason. So if you say that anti-Semitism is not really about anti-Semitism, is about anti-elitism, and it's
Yes.
just a misperception that Jews are the elite when reality Jews are only 20% of the elite. But the anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory. because
It's a
really
red
they just
herring,
hate the elite.
in other
They don't
words,
hate the Jews, they hate the elite, and they make a
who don't
misperception that the
serve
Jews
the
are.
people that they're supposed to serve.
I mean, that's where you say, like, okay, it's understandable why people believe in the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that because 20% of the elite, because disproportionate amount of Jews make up the
And the
elite.
other thing is that Jews have this legal protection that other groups don't have. In the UK, they have this thing called a protected characteristic, a protected on grounds of race and gender and religion and sexual orientation, and I think it will soon have gender identity, and Jews have both. You know, they're protected as a race, even if they're not, you know, even secular Jews get protected, and they also get protection as a member of as a religious group. And I think Muslims also get it too. I mean, you know, they have the protection of being as a religious group, and also, you know, they will tend not to be white, and also they have two protections, and it is the the indigenous white man, probably who's right at the bottom of the heap, and what causes a problem is that he's supposed to be responsible for, you know, all the colonialism and, you know, just doing whatever he's supposed to do in government, and he has the lower status. He can't say anything, or he'll be accused of something or other. So it means that a lot of important decisions just aren't made, a lot of important issues just aren't discussed, and it's exacerbating the problem of incompetent and corrupt government, because, you know, the so-called elite senior male won't say anything because he doesn't want to be cancelled. So none of the issues are addressed. Nothing you know, none of the problems will be solved, and so it'll get worse, and the pressure will continue to build up.
Yeah, so if it's like Rabbi Mizrachi or like the rabbinic Kabbalistic point of view of boom and bust cycles, that, you know, like from the religious point of view, you know, God is slow to anger and gives us a long time to repent, but eventually, you know, God forbid, if we've sinned too much and haven't repented, you know, there'll be a catastrophic event to reset the scales.
Yes,
And so, I mean, you're saying that from a
I think the whole
practical,
idea of being
right? Let me
right
just
at,
finish here. You're saying that from a practical, you know, political, even, you know, agnostic point of view, and just the levers of why Jews have these boom bust cycles, where basically, you the you know, call it rigged, or, you know, the system we have, it's set up in a way where the only way to reset things is through a catastrophic event, and it'll basically require the complete destruction of society to you know, get rid of Jewish power. Well, you have to have someone like Ye, who's willing to lose everything, and, or, you know, for his you know, vengeance against the Jews, and you know, an element of the larger anti-Semitic population that will bring down society just to remove Jews from power, and you know, but, you know, God forbid the historic, like, God forbid the 109 of just these boom bust cycles, and to say that
well, it
you
can
know, Jews can
end.
feel we're at the end of our boom cycle, and we're approaching the bust cycle, and you know, so like people like Rabbi Mizrachi are warning about it. You know, most of your Israeli friends that are on here are warning about it, and you say, like, you know, it's a boom bust cycle, and it doesn't take a genius to see the boom is over and it's about time for the bust.
Well, yes, because, you know, even without Jews, the minorities of any country will, and the minorities can be the elite, because the elite are a minority, you see. So even if you take the, you know, the race and the, you know, religion out of it, there will, certain people will get the blame when they get bad government. So the people at the bottom, and there's always more people at the bottom than people at the top, they will blame the minority, and the minority are the elite who didn't serve
Well, it'd
them
be a
well.
revolution. I mean, it'd be a
Yeah, there will
revolution
be
and
a
a purging of the
revolution.
elite. I mean, basically, for the Jews, because we're disproportionately part of the elite, when there's a
And you
revolution and the
get
purge of the
treated
elites.
better if you get. This was something the
One thing,
late Rabbi
when
Sachs
there's a
said.
revolution and they go after the elites, the Jews are always the first group, like, saying, because we're the most associated with the elite. And if they want to revolt against the elite, a certain amount of the population and a certain amount of truth is that's going to be a revolt against the Jews. And so, any country where the Jews have been, here for a while, have assimilated, have reached high levels of power, and society is starting to crumble, and we've gotten drunk off of Rome, fat and lax behavior, and the society's rigged, that the lower classes, the peasants, the masses have no chance of getting ahead. Societies became too degenerated, that the
We
only
have a caste
choice
system.
is revolution, and that will be the bus cycle for for the Jews, God forbid, like Holocaust expulsion. So like just the general revolution, toppling of government, renewal of society. It will be worse for the Jews than the other people. Like God forbid, like the
Well,
Holocaust.
I don't know.
Half of the Jews got killed. Um, like as opposed to the Gentile population, only like 10% of the Gentile population got killed. So the purging of the elites, um, is generally disastrous for everybody. But because Jews disproportionately make up the elite, it's worse for the Jews than anybody else. So society has to be at a real tipping point of negativity for society to revolt and purge the elite.
Well,
But
I mean, it's like the Cultural Revolution. I mean, the thing was, the landlords got it in the neck, the lecturers in university got it in the neck, the rich people got it in
well,
the
the elites
neck.
in general. I mean,
Yeah.
the revolution requires a removal of the elite and an institution of new power. For the institution of the new power, the old guard has to be completely purged. And God forbid, if 20% of the old guard is made up of Jews, and 1/3 of the Jewish population is part of the guard,
Yeah, but
even
don't
though
take it
2/3.
personally. It's just the elite.
Well, I'm
And,
saying it's just the nature of boom bust revolution cycle. So like if you're a poor Jew and you're saying, well, but I mean, but factually about 1/3 of the Jews are elites, and so even though 2/3 of the Jews are not elites, still that if you're a logical revolutionary and you want to get the elite, just going after a Jew, you got a 1 out of 3 chance that you're getting rid of one of the elites. And so it's a KanYe West, saying like there's just 10 Jews that screwed up. But and so like God forbid the Jewish people are going to back the 10 Jews who screwed them, and therefore KanYe West is going to try to lead a revolution against the whole Jewish people, just to get the 10 Jews who screwed them. God forbid. And even the 10 Jews who screwed them are probably not even that Jewish. They're probably like half Jews or married to non-Jews, like Pete Davidson. Like, God forbid that like the major Jew that, caused KanYe West to turn against the Jew isn't really even, he's only a quarter Jew. He's not even,
not halakhically Jewish.
he's not even halakhically Jewish,
Mm-hmm.
but he was the initial cause of KanYe West turning against the Jews. He saw Pete Davidson, he saw a Jew. And then the Jews, for whatever reason, figure like, okay, KanYe West or Pete Davidson, I'm going on Pete Davidson's side. I don't know much about him. He's not really a halakhic Jew, but like KanYe West, Pete Davidson, I'm going to side with Pete Davidson. And then, so it escalates from there. And, saying if it could have been de-escalated from the beginning when it was just the conflict between KanYe West and Pete Davidson.
Well, it just needs somebody to say, this nonsense has to stop. It just needs orders from the top.
At this
But there
point, it's
is
probably too late.
nobody in charge.
I mean, at this point, it's just like Russia and Ukraine. What's the path out? And if you have, at a certain point, so if it's Putin or like Assad, like you're too big to fail, and it's basically kill or be killed. That the only way out is death, and so your only way to win is to win the war, and if you lose, it's going to be death. So KanYe West at this point, is there a peaceful way of de-escalation, and can the Jewish community apologize? Can the Jewish community of the handful of Jews that screwed KanYe West stand up and be like, look, we were wrong. We are Jews. This conflict doesn't have anything to do with the larger Jewish population, and we're going to apologize and try to make amends to KanYe West. Or, to some
What
extent,
did they do
KanYe
to
West.
him anyway? I just haven't been following it at all.
Well, God forbid adultery. I mean, the Jewish man was banging his wife.
Oh.
As I said, Pete Davidson.
Oh, right. I mean, I didn't even know.
I mean, it's like O.J.
I thought it was
Simpson.
some sort of
O.J.
music
Simpson killed the
contract
Jewish
thing.
man. O.J. Simpson killed the Jewish man because he was, banging his wife. Goldman saying it started when a Jewish man, was having an affair with his wife.
Oh, okay. I didn't
And
even
it's
know
like he's
that.
not even really that Jewish. He's only a quarter Jewish, but he, Jewish enough that then his Jewish management, he was still partners with Jared Kushner by saying his Jewish partners that were partners in his business and Kardashian or whatever took sides in the issue. And
Well, perhaps if there were.
it started with it was actually the same as Taylor Swift. Also, KanYe West's Jewish partners wanted to sell his music catalog, and it was. I mean, if you follow the issue, it started with a personal rivalry between KanYe West and his Jewish friends, and then some, Jewish business partner, and then a quarter Jew banging his wife, and then his Jewish friends taking the side of the Jewish guy that was banging his wife.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, really, that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
And then until KanYe West said the DEFCON 3 on the Jews. So at a certain point, KanYe West posted a picture. Something on. It was a slow escalation. KanYe West posted like an Instagram thing of P. Diddy saying that P. Diddy was owned by the Jews, and that was in relation to personal affairs where P. Diddy was taking the side of his Jewish business partners. And so he made a post that P. Diddy was owned by the Jews, and for that he got kicked off of Instagram. And then he made the post of DEFCON 3 on the Jews on Twitter, and then after that he got deleted from Twitter, and it became like the news story that KanYe West, he's like the next Hitler because he says he's going to go DEFCON 3 on the Jews by saying till the point with the DEFCON 3, it was just a dispute with KanYe West and 10 Jews that were his friends. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it sounds like a kind of.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was following it the whole time and saying like I don't really follow the music, but they're saying that it got escalated from a personal dispute between KanYe West and 10 of his Jewish friends, and then when he did the DEFCON 3, the Jewish community got involved. And obviously, he's a big personality. He might have, I mean, I'm not completely defending KanYe West in that matter. I'm not saying he was right at all, but I'm just saying that in my estimation, that those handful of Jews probably were wrong to KanYe West. And so that extent of the initial battle between KanYe West and Pete Davidson and his business partners, KanYe West was probably more in the right than in the wrong. That's my estimation. And then when he did DEFCON 3 on the Jews, it became KanYe West against all the Jews, and no one cares anymore about the original dispute he had with just a handful of Jews with who he was largely in the right on. I don't know if you agree with my assessment.
Well, I haven't been following it, but it does sound a bit trivial and sort of personal, and it's like, well, I mean, all these mean people could have just, screwed your wife whether they were Jewish or not.
Like, of course, how more personal could it get?
No, I'm just saying,
I mean,
even if they weren't Jewish, I mean, it sounds like they could have screwed him over.
He said it on Lex Friedman himself. He was about to go O.J. Simpson on Pete Davidson. I mean, he said it himself.
But okay, I'm saying that even if they were the same race, they could have still, killed each other over, having their wife.
O.J. Simpson wasn't really considered like an anti-Semite, even though he killed a Jewish man. No one thinks that O.J. Simpson killed Goldman because he was an anti-Semite. Everybody thinks that O.J. Simpson killed Goldman because he was banging his wife.
Yeah, but I
I
mean,
don't think anyone connected to say like, well, if it was a Gentile who was banging his wife, he wouldn't have killed him. It's only because Goldman was a Jew and banging his wife that he killed him. I don't think anyone thinks that. Everyone thinks that the reason why O.J. Simpson killed the Jewish man was because he was having an affair with his wife. And so to say like that's really how this, like the degeneracy. That's how this started. When a Jewish man had an affair, and even they might have been separated, but they weren't divorced, and a Jewish man started having an affair with his wife. I mean, really, that's how this started. I'm saying, like, this is factual. Like, you could look up on anyone listening could Google this, and KanYe West himself said he went to Japan because, like, that he said that he was about to kill Pete Davidson. That if he hadn't been in Japan, he would have went and tried to kill Pete Davidson.
but perhaps there should be some penalty for, this sort of thing.
There's no penalty in the U.S. for adultery.
There is, isn't there? Or there isn't,
Well,
or
it's
there
grounds for
are
divorce.
laws but which are
it's
not
ground for divorce.
enforced.
There's no legal penalty. It's ground for divorce. And then in return that his business partners took advantage of the situation to get an upper hand in a business negotiation. And these were KanYe West's longstanding Jewish friends and partners that took advantage of the situation to gain an upper hand in business negotiations. And this is just the history of it. I mean, maybe you don't care, but I was saying since you labeled it talking about Ye, that we're talking about escalation, where a simple escalation, not a simple, obviously KanYe West was still one of the richest, most popular people in the world, but a simple escalation between KanYe West and his former Jewish friends have turned into probably the most significant anti-Semitic news story in the 21st century.
Yeah, because I guess, people are obsessed by Jews having more rights than they do, and, they're just a
but I'm saying
minority.
KanYe West wasn't obsessed by Jews. KanYe West
Now he is, isn't he?
KanYe West just wants to get revenge on the handful of Jews that screwed him. And then when he sees that, like, well, all the Jewish people are on this guy's side, this guy bangs my wife, and like none of the Jews are taking my side. Not a single Jew is out there and saying like I'm in the right. Every single Jew saying he's in the wrong. And so from his perspective, it's became possibly a battle between him and all the Jews, or maybe he doesn't care. Like he might not care about all the Jews. He just wants to get revenge on, just on Pete Davidson, on a handful of Jews. But he's got the money and resources to team up with, the people that have been making, their life about counter-Semitism. And really, Nick Fuentes, counter-Semitism is just a small part of Nick Fuentes. Like Nick Fuentes is a counter-Semite, but of his American First, he's not like Patrick Little, where like his main issue was counter-Semitism. I would put like probably at most 10% of Nicholas Fuentes' platform is anti-Semitism.
Okay.
But I'm saying the Jews are escalating it, and that's why I'm saying like we're really causing it upon ourselves. I mean, first we're causing it upon ourselves by entering into a personal conflict between KanYe West and the man who had an affair with his wife and his business partners that may or may not have acted justly with them, and then him teaming up with Nicholas Fuentes and meeting with Donald Trump to pressuring Donald Trump to disavow someone, which is against his style, to pressuring for censorship, to now pressuring for the complete cancellation of one of the most popular people in America.
Yeah. This reminds me of Richard Spencer. Didn't he bang somebody's the wife of one of his supporters or something?
I'm not sure about that, but I mean, he definitely. That she had sexual relations with him, and she had slept with a few people, but she wasn't his wife, possibly a girlfriend. Now, I mean, if you're thinking of that Matt Heimbach of the American Workers' Party, where it's actually like his father-in-law. It was some like relative or some some weird. It wasn't like a normal affair. It was like his like stepmother or something like that, or some weird amount. But I think Richard Spencer, maybe it was someone's girlfriend, but there were a lot of promiscuity, and a lot of the people on the alt-right had sexual relations with the same woman, but I don't think it was actually an affair. But yeah, that's what led to I forget the name of the guy, like who was his right-hand guy. He was actually pretty scholarly, knew Arabic, and he dumped Spencer after the Michigan State rally, for various reasons. But one of it was because Spencer like banged his girlfriend.
Well, the French would call these things, I mean, would justify the murder of, either the errant wife or the errant wife's lover or both. I mean, they called it a crime of passion, didn't
Yeah,
they?
I mean, God forbid if KanYe West had just, God forbid, killed Pete Davidson, and then ended up in prison, it would have all been over. But like instead of KanYe West killing Pete Davidson, he ended up in a feud with the Jewish people.
Yes, and I suppose if there had been fault-based divorce, then he could have. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
there
controlled
would have been
opposition
some
has the name in the
remedy.
chat. Greg Conte, or whatever that. I mean, whatever. I mean, these are well-known news stories, so I'm not really much of a talebearer, but that was even testified under oath in the Charlottesville hearings.
Testified what under oath about what?
About Richard Spencer's like sexual activity, like even the.
Oh, I imagine most women would find him hard to resist, I suppose.
Well, I mean, saying that most women are not promiscuous. Most women are not going to have sexual relationship out of marriage. I mean, at this point, probably are, but historically to say like, no, God forbid, most women are not going to have sexual relations outside of marriage, and so there's.
But
That,
sexual promiscuity is also a cause of conflict, wouldn't you
well, I
say?
mean, that's the fake conservatism saying that generally promiscuity. There's no promiscuity in the conservative movement. That's why we're conservatives. You got to wait till you're married.
Yes.
And so I mean, Richard Spencer was the alt-right, and because he didn't represent conservative values, he was sleeping around.
Is Richard Spencer still nationalist? I seem to remember that there was some.
I mean, he's a leftist, and he's still streaming, begging for super chat. Luke Ford's still following him. He's still around. He still makes appearances, but I mean, he's denounced all of that. But I'm saying he was never he was alt-right. He was never conservative. He never had conservative values like that. And one of that would have been, like sexual propriety, and that's like the Me Too, like the thought that the Me Too would have got all these white conservative men, and like there are some conservative hypocrites, but like generally sexual propriety is one of the the standard bearer principles of the conservative movement. Pro-life. We're pro-life because we favor sexual propriety. We're not worried about all these abortions because we favor sexual propriety. I'm happy to get married and only have one relation with one woman my whole life. I don't need pro-choice. I don't need the right to commit abortion because like I conduct myself in a sexually appropriate way. That that just the thought of needing abortion to be legal seems ridiculous to me because I conduct myself in a sexually appropriate way. So that's the standard bearer for conservative movement.
Well, it used to be said that conservative politicians in Britain would tend to get embroiled in sexual scandals, and Labour politicians would get.
And that was Trump. That's why Trump Trump was a degenerate. Like the Republicans realized due to demographic change that the Republicans were going to lose, and all of the Republican candidates would have lost to Hillary Clinton. They would have got spanked badly, mostly due to demographics. And Trump was really the only man who could have won. He was a former Democrat, and he was an extremely inappropriate person that didn't represent conservative values. But he was trustworthy that he was going to do what he said in terms of making appointments to the Supreme Court. And that's where you had the reason why Trump was able to win was because the alt-right and the alt-light and because of the like Milo Yiannopoulos, and like you could be a homosexual Republican. Dave Rubin, the old original alt-right, that was the big tent that was like everyone get behind Trump and vote Republican and we'll win. And then it kind of fell apart afterwards. But that included because Trump was a degenerate, and you had the grandfathering in of gay marriage, of homosexual Republicans, of degenerates like Richard Spencer, who was promiscuous, and but I'm saying classically, like there was no such thing as a promiscuous conservative, and if they were when it was found out, they might have been a hypocrite, but when they found out, they had to resign. I mean, there was always conservatives that was found out they had an affair, or like their wife had an abortion, and and that was usually career ending. But Trump came in, created the big tent. The alt-right, almost no one on the alt-right had standard conservative values, most notably sexual proprietariness, and like that's why Milo Yiannopoulos coming back now, he was the main spokesman for that. Look, you could be a homosexual and Republican, and so millions of homosexuals or people that had Republican leanings but didn't want to vote Republican because they thought Republicans were homophobic. So Milo Yiannopoulos was the poster boy that was held up like, look, like you could be a homosexual Republican. You remember this stuff? You weren't following back then.
Well, it makes sense.
He was more important than Richard Spencer. So I mean, like the homosexual, in terms of like the vote, because the elections are won by votes, and in terms of the homosexual issue, was probably millions of votes, because to win the election, Trump needed like 80, 90 million votes, and there were a few million people that had like homosexual family members, or maybe participated in homosexual stuff or were homosexual and didn't want to vote for a Republican that was anti-homosexual, and Trump was okay with homosexuals. And that's why Milo Yiannopoulos was on the Trump campaign. He's like, look, I'm buddies with Trump. I'm on the Trump campaign, and I'm a flaming homosexual, and no one's bothering me. Mm-hmm. And, so Richard Spencer with the white nationalism brought in less votes than the homosexuals. Like Milo Yiannopoulos, the alt-right was more important to Trump than the white nationalists. And saying of the people that were like, I'm white nationalist, but and I don't trust the U.S. government, but because of Trump, I'm going to vote Republican. There were actually less of those people than the homosexual vote, and that's why Milo Yiannopoulos was a bigger name in 2016 than Richard Spencer. And they worked together. In 2016, before the election, Richard Spencer and Milo Yiannopoulos worked together in this thing. They were both degenerates. God forbid, neither one of them practiced sexual propriety. And from my perspective, you could say homosexuality, like biblically, is worse. But if you have proper conservative Torah values, abstinence is the only choice. And so if you're promiscuous with women or homosexual, it's both degenerate. Mm-hmm. Even like the clip they were playing of Nicholas Fuentes, mm-hmm. saying that like having sex with women is gay. To some extent, he's right. Conservative values, you don't get to have sex with women, only your wife. And like, so that like you can't be.
It's all extramarital sex anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's really like, I mean, maybe homosexuality biblically is worse, but it's not much worse. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just a history lesson of how Trump won the election. That goes back to how we opened. Democracy is about winning elections, and Trump needed the homosexual. He needed the homosexual vote, and not just like gay Republicans, but the people who only would have voted Republicans if the Republicans dropped anti-homosexuality from the platform. Mm-hmm. And also promiscuity. I mean, just like Richard Spencer, like Donald Trump is a degenerate. Like besides for his ex-wife and all his statements and all the women claiming that he did these things, like I don't think any conservative had any question Trump is a degenerate. Was a degenerate. They just realized that he was their only chance of winning, and that's what democracy is about: winning. and any of the other candidates, like if Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz. I mean, if you tell me Ted Cruz, a lot of people claim that Ted Cruz is a hypocrite, but I think most people would believe that Ted Cruz never cheated on his wife, and it's possible he only had sex with one woman his whole life. Although there was some small statements about him being kind of like a creep at Harvard Law School, but like no woman came forward on Marco Rubio, on Jed Bush, on even Governor Christie. All those people had legitimate anti-degenerate, conservative, pro-abstinence values, but all of them would have lost. Only Trump had the chance to win.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you for giving us.
To finish up on that point, now, really demographic change and other issues, not even Trump could win anymore. So like what happened in 2016 with like the alt-right and the alt-light and the Big Tent that allowed Trump to win, demographics have changed enough in the last 4 years that it's almost impossible for a Republican to ever win again. And so like a Big Tent alt-right, based Black conservatives and Jewish conservatives, is unlikely to help a Republican win for president. And like if you have the boom bust cycle, now you have a purging of the system, or could be KanYe West or Nick Fuentes, where you have a national movement that basically the main issue is removal of Jews from power, God forbid. So it is looking pretty bad. I don't think it has to. I mean, God forbid, we should repent immediately, try to become better people. But it's looking pretty bad for the U.S. Like, I don't see any way out of this. I don't see any way that ends good. Maybe that we could slowly decline and lose power in a stable, peaceful way. But I would.
Well, or Trump could propose a one-party state and say let's forget all these stupid elections and where nobody gets what they want, and nobody trusts anybody.
Well, I mean, that'd be like a totalitarian, because there's
it
no.
Be totalitarian. I mean, people always say that, but you just don't get to vote. You can complain all you like. You don't get to vote.
Yeah, but I mean, who's the one party going to be, and how do they rise to power? So I mean, the one party usually rise to power through violence, through revolution.
No. I mean, okay.
There's no path. There's no path to an elected one party state. So I mean, if you can't win, you can't get into a one party state through elections, through democracy. So generally the path to a one party state is
suspend the Constitution. I mean, that's what Hitler did. That's what he did. He suspended. He banned all political parties after suspending the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, so some sort of revolution that would likely be violent. So I mean, there's really no historical precedence for what you're saying that doesn't include revolution and violence.
Well, actually, Hitler wasn't. I suppose you could call the Night of the Long Knives violence, but it wasn't. Do you happen to remember how many people died in it? I mean, there was a Reichstag fire.
Yeah, I mean, it was a few thousand, and then he took power, and then he started decitizening people. He started the first thing, then like over the years, he started taking rights and citizenship away from people. So whoever did that in the U.S., if somehow it'd be most likely a faction of the Democratic Party, and I mean, let's say, just for the sake of example, let's say the Black Democratic Caucus somehow takes over power and suspends the Constitution, and you have like Kamala Harris and the Black Democratic Caucus are all of a sudden the theocratic leaders of America, and they suspend the Constitution, and then they slowly start taking away rights and citizenship. But I mean, God forbid. I mean, practically, that's the most. If anyone was going to do that in America, the most together group is the blacks, and so it'd most likely be like Kamala Harris teaming up with the Black Congressional Caucus.
Really? I would have thought. Well,
I mean,
the whites are still the majority. They
don't have a together movement. I'm saying the blacks are disproportionately. One thing, blacks control Washington, D.C. Like Washington, D.C. itself is like the East Coast. Most of the major cities along the East Coast are like 20% black. The Congressional Black Caucus is like 20% black. If Kamala Harris somehow became president, but they have a cohesive unit that there's no cohesive unit of whites in U.S. power, and like I said, Washington D.C. is it's not controlled by blacks, but it's demographically controlled by blacks. That would be the most likely to say. If there was a single faction that would be able to usurp power, it would probably be the blacks.
Right. Well, I didn't know things were so bad.
Well, I didn't say they're so bad. I'm just saying that if you're just making a scenario for saying that if someone was able to usurp control and disband the Constitution and take over the U.S. government, the most likely group to do it would be the blacks. Because there's no real faction of whites in the Republican, because the Democratic, Republicans aren't together as a white cohesive unit, and there's a division among whites between Democrats and Republicans, as opposed to blacks are like 90% Democrats, and then also saying demographically that blacks dominate most of the urban centers along the East Coast, most specifically Washington D.C. and Baltimore, right next to Washington D.C. That population-wise, if somehow the blacks were able to usurp control of Washington and the federal government, that there's like tens of millions of blacks in in that area. So you could look at like Jews or something, but there's so few Jews, and the Jews in power, and there's no population, and the whites as a group, they're like Christians, like it'd be like Protestants versus even if you divide among Protestants, although like 80% of Republicans are Protestants, you have some Catholics, and still like 30% of Democrats are white Protestants also. So it should be very, the likelihood that like what white Protestants are going to team up Republican, Democrat to usurp power. And then if white Protestants, the Republican white, evangelical Protestants, it would, just God forbid, just if you saw the you'll be like London. If you wanted, if there was a faction that was going to take over the UK government, so London's a minority white city. And so the base of power is in London, and so it'd be unlikely that a white group would be able to usurp power in London. But it's not like America, saying they already like 20% of the Congress is black, and they have a strong center, and it's not just like London is 50% non-white. Actually Washington D.C. is like literally 70% African American. So if you just played through a scenario like that, I think the black are the only people capable of doing. I'm not even saying that they're likely to do. I don't think anyone could do it. It's too factional. But you'd have to look into practically it's unlikely that that you could have a one party. That's why I've said for years, balkanization. Most likely America would be like Russia. America would fall apart. The federal government would just lose faith in the citizenry, and the federal government wouldn't have enough power to enforce rulership over the whole vast area of the land, and you would have parts of America that would secede from the federal government, and you have like a balkanization like the former USSR.
Wow. Well,
We can end on that unless there's something else you want to say. Pray for better things.
No.
Pray for better
Food for
things.
thought. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so God bless, and hopefully, let's like de-escalate, don't escalate, because the path of escalation is not good, and people want to win, and it's the nature of democracy that and even just getting over 50%, like the UK has a parliamentary system. You don't have to get over 50%. The US, just getting over 50%, escalate, God forbid. So, and then even with that, like, if you give up, so I've already given up on the system, but I still try to make use of my time, learn useful things. Hopefully, whoever does take over would find Doovid useful. If it's the blacks, if it's balkanization, if it's whoever takes over, that they'll find Doovid useful.
Yes, yes. Well, and you're prepared to work for any side.
Well, yeah, I'm on God's side, really. But yeah, I would function for my neighbor, my society. Generally, I'm a libertarian. So I think the collapse of the government would probably be a good thing. Just generally that, we don't really need centralized power. So, like I'll work with my area, my neighbors, regardless of the power structure.
Well, that's good to know. I imagine your neighbours and family will find that reassuring to have you in a position of power.
Well, I'm not seeking a position. I'm saying just do something useful. I'm more engineer. Like I'm not seeking power. I'm saying just fulfill my obligation to society, to be a good citizen of whatever I'm part of. But no, I have absolutely no desire for positions of power. And so I'm libertarian. I'd only theoretically try to rise to power to get rid of power, which is futile in the first place. So it's oxymoronic to I want to get to power so that I could like Trump, like draining the swamp. It doesn't happen like that. So yeah, I follow the news and the politics. I follow more of the Jewish stuff. I think it's symbolic. It's because Jews disproportionately make up a large percentage of the elite. So the people's feelings about the Jews. That's kind of what Jordan Peterson was saying. Jordan Peterson's anti-Semitism is like the canary in the coal mine, where the view of Jews is symbolic of the view towards elites in general.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, God bless, Claire. Thanks for reaching out.
Thank you for coming.
When's your strike over? Another few days, or it could be a while?
I think another 4 days. Yeah.
Okay, God bless.
All right. You too. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Have a great night.
Yes, you too. Bye.